All right, welcome to Health and Wellness with Coach A.T. Moore. Today we have another amazing guest. We have Dr. Ann Louise T. Lockhart. She is she is located currently in San Antonio, but we're going to ask her how she ended up in Texas because she's really from St. Croix. So welcome to the show, Dr. Lockhart.
Thank you, Coach. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
You are the president and owner of A New Day Pediatric Psychology.
That is correct.
So what's the meaning behind the name?
So it's funny how I came to it because it was so hard finding a name. Yes. And I know people say don't get stuck on the name of your business, just do what feels right. But I was like, it needs to be significant. And I remember I was listening to like a bunch of old school songs and I'd be like texting my friend. And I was like, what about Toni Braxton, like Breathe Again? Or business. She goes, that's so dumb. Don't do that. I'm like, okay, what about like Jars of Clay? I'm like, okay, like, she's like, just step back. So I was really trying to find out, like, what am I trying to communicate with the name? And I wanted people to feel like you can always start over. Yeah. You can always start over. There's always a new day. You can always start over. And you can always start new. You can always start fresh. And that was the whole idea behind it. And so that's why I have the logo as being the sun. So that way it's like, yes, it's always a fresh start. And so, so whether it's with therapy or coaching or group or courses, any of that kind of, my Instagram page, like it's always about starting over, starting fresh, and you can always start new.
Yeah. There's also like a brightness to your social media page. I don't know if it's
Thank you.
Maybe it's the smile or the energy, but New Day and the energy that you give out goes with Bright Day. So I love the name. I'm always curious about people's name of their companies and stuff because I think it always has meaning. So what led you into this career field?
So it's a long process. So originally, I was going to go into fashion and business.
Ooh.
So growing up on St. Croix, my mom and her sister had a children's clothing store. They had it for over 30 years. And I worked in the store and I did everything from the window display to buying trips with them to helping out the customers' deposits to the bank, like everything. And I loved it. And I was supposed to take over the store, like open up like a chain or whatever. And I got to college, went to Buffalo, New York for college. And I took my first few business courses and I was like, oh no, this is not what I want to be doing. This is not for me, which ironically ended up in business anyway. And I changed my major several times, really kind of got into different areas, did a lot of like volunteer work. And just through a process of just a lot of stuff, I realized that psychology was what I really wanted to do after working in higher education for several years.
Me too.
And yes. And I did residence life and admissions and career counseling and all these different things, but I kept coming back to helping people who were hurting. And I always kept thinking, wow, if I could have helped this particular person earlier in their life, how different would their life have been today? And I didn't feel like I could have that same impact doing admissions recruiting. I felt like it had to be more than that. And so I got into that. I really started looking into doing more psychology and therapy type stuff. And I got into working with kids with play therapy and Sandtray and working with kids who were abused and homeless. And then the rest kind of is history, just kind of getting into psychology.
On your Instagram, put your Instagram here so people can start following you and get to know that this is something y'all need to check out every day. You're going to learn something and you're going to laugh because she's very funny. And on her, in the description, it says, I help overwhelmed parents get on the same page and better understand their kids and teens. What led you to see that this was a need?
Because I kept hearing it over and over and over again. Parents who were just so overwhelmed and they couldn't understand why their toddler was having tantrums, for example, why they couldn't just stay in their bed, why their 8-year-old was not wanting to go to school, why their 10-year-old had bad self-esteem, why their teenager didn't take a shower, they couldn't clean up their room. Like they kept attributing all these things to some deficiency in their kid. Mm-hmm. There was something going on, that they were lazy or just unmotivated or whatever other issue. And I'm like, these people don't understand child development. Like, why would they? Like, I understand it because I went to school for it. So like, I wanted to help people better understand why their child or teenager or toddler was doing what they were doing from a very practical perspective, without all the gobbledygook of science and technical terms, and make it very practical, so that when they were responding from a place of understanding, so that they could actually respond differently and more effectively than how we always did back in the day, kind of thing.
Yeah, parenting has definitely changed. Some of the services that your clinic provides are virtual parent coaching and virtual life coaching. Now, did the virtual piece kind of happen during the pandemic? Because I felt like I was introduced to you during the pandemic. Maybe I just found you. I know you were on social media and doing your thing before that, but I became aware of you during the pandemic. So did a lot of these services come out of the pandemic as far as the virtual piece, or did you always have that?
I always had it, but it wasn't so heavy.
Yeah.
Over the pandemic, when we went 100% virtual, then it became big because people were stuck at home or safe at home, however they wanted to have it as a perception. And they were like, there was nothing else to do. There was no sporting events. There was no new movie releases. There was no traveling. And people were literally at home with their partners, their spouses, their kids.
Yeah.
And they were online. And they needed help because they weren't used to being with their kids all the time. And they were losing their minds. And so I really pivoted and realized that people needed more help right where they were. Right. And so I went from maybe seeing like 20% of my clients online to like 100%. So that's where a lot of that was kind of adapted based on the need, right? Just looking to where the need is. Yeah. And then adapting, kind of like Netflix versus Blockbuster, right?
Yeah, need, right, absolutely. Now your practice offers a lot of services, and you are a business because you have clinicians that actually work with you. What are some of the other services outside of parent coaching and life coaching that your practice provides?
So for me, I'm a pediatric psychologist by training. So I've been licensed as a psychologist for 16 years. So I provide therapy, and I also have professionals who provide that as well. So I have 2 individuals who are licensed professional counselors, and they provide therapy for kids all the way up through adults. And so they do that as well as the parent coaching and life coaching. I also have an individual who is trained as an occupational therapist who provides in-home behavior consultation as well as school observation, so that if people are having significant issues with their kids or preteens at a school setting, where she can observe them, provide consultation to the teachers and guidance and help, that kind of stuff, or go into the home environment to help the parents with issues with bedtime or transitions or tantrums, meltdowns, and really providing very practical suggestions from that perspective. So those are the major things that we do is the therapy piece as well as the parent coaching piece for all ages. So from really little toddlers all the way up through college age adults as well.
So for anyone watching right now that's not very familiar with occupational therapy, can you kind of briefly give us a description of what that is?
Yeah, so occupational therapy is, they do a lot of stuff related to our everyday behaviors, our everyday tasks. So whether it's helping someone with being more flexible and helping them with transitions, a lot of the stuff they do is very similar to what psychologists or therapists do. They do a lot of stuff in terms of if there's issues with handwriting or issues with what she calls it like high engine kids, where there's lots of energy and they don't know how to channel that energy. And she helps them with kind of doing the deep breaths and how to redirect their attention to other things so that they're not getting in trouble, that they're not kicking their teacher, that they're not being kicked out of school. And really helping them in the moment. So I love occupational therapists because they do such practical stuff in the moment, and they can help with a wide range of issues. And especially if a kid has like sensory issues. So they're very sensitive to their tags or their clothing or their socks or the loudness in the environment. And they have a really in-depth understanding of those things. So she applies that in terms of the behavior consultation role and really helping parents understand that so they can respond to their kid differently and more effectively.
Yeah. So anyone that's watching that is trying to figure out, what different career paths are in the mental health space, this is something that you might want to consider if what she described is something that you are interested in. Now, her practice provides a lot of resources for parents and kids. But today we're just going to focus on the parent coaching, and hopefully we can have her back to talk more about the things that are in my wheelhouse, which is ADHD and executive functioning. But right now, I just want to focus on the parent coaching piece. So can you just kind of describe like what it is that you provide for parent in regards to parent coaching? Because I'm a coach, but I'm like a physical trainer coach, played sports, and so I coach sports. So when I think coaching, I think it's execution, right? I'm going to help you get the tools, put you in the right position so you can execute the play. So how does parent coaching, how is it similar or different than that?
Yes, great question. So it is very similar because what I'm doing is I'm helping to educate the parents in terms of, well, first assessing to see what they're doing well and what they think that they suck at and they need to improve on and why. I look at like even some of their background, how they were parented and what they want to keep from that, what they want to get rid of, and what their mindset was about parenting. What I find is that most parents, including myself, when we got into the whole role of parenting, we didn't think about it too much. You just got a baby, had a baby, adopted a baby, whatever it was that we did, but you weren't thinking about what their personality was going to be like, how you were going to parent them, what they were going to be interested in. Maybe we had an idealistic view of it, but it's just kind of getting all of that. What was their mindset about parenting and what is their mindset now? And then really helping them to understand, like, what are your goals then? What are your ultimate goals? And especially with the whole thing with getting parents on the same page. Mm-hmm. A lot of times what I find is couples, they think they're on different pages. And then I talk to them and I say, well, what are your goals individually as a parent for your kids? And their goals are the same. We want them to be a well-adjusted member of society. We want them to have respect for others. We want them to be successful, whatever that looks like for them. We want them to be happy and adapt to changing situations. And I'm like, so you think the fact that you want to feed your kid candy and you don't, you think that's going to impact any of that stuff you just said? Like, when we're looking at the wrong things, is that really what's causing conflict? Is that really that important? So really helping them to identify the essentials versus the non-essentials, and then getting them on the same page or even in the same chapter. Yeah. Knowing that having complementary parenting styles is actually a good thing. Right. Your kid doesn't need two parents, for example, who think and act and behave the exact same way. It's actually healthy for them to see someone do it differently in very different complementary ways. So as a parent coach, really helping them all of that, seeing all of that perspective. And then my background as a pediatric psychologist really helps to inform that, because I have that child development knowledge. I have that background knowledge for doing that for so many years before doing parent coaching, and then giving them that perspective so that they can move forward with actionable steps. So at the end of every session, say, this is what you talked about. These were the issues. Now let's try these things this week or this upcoming month and see how it goes. And then making tweaks based on that.
Yeah, I love that you started out with what the parent is doing correctly from a strength base. I think that's very helpful, because I think sometimes parents feel defeated when they don't understand the behavior. So what do you think parents need to better understand about their child's behavior or developmental delays or challenges that will kind of help bring more, or maybe even normalize some things?
Any particular age?
Let's start with the toddler.
So what they need to better understand? Yeah,
because one of the age group that we hear a lot about and we see all over social media is the tantrum from the terrible twos.
Yes.
And so when should a parent look at the developmental tantrums that are developmentally appropriate to looking at it from maybe a clinical intervention? Like, what's normal and what's not normal?
Fantastic question. So I think it's important for parents to understand that a lot of the behaviors that you see as annoying and irritating are actually developmentally appropriate. And I know that's not reassuring, but it's true. So when we look at the quote terrible twos and the three-nager and all these different terms that people come up with, the fact is kids between 2 and 5, they are learning. Everything is new. Yeah. They're learning that they now have a voice. They can now walk on their own without some grown-up carrying them around. They can wipe their own bottom. They can feed their own self. They could put themselves to bed or take themselves out. They can run away from you if they want. They can say no. Like, look how much power that is.
Yeah.
So the 2 to 5 age group, there's a lot of autonomy or independence, a lot of feeling of control, and a lot of having their own voice. So a lot of what you're going to see, and a significant growth spurt in their brain.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the stuff that you're going to see is because they're learning so much. All these neurons are firing and exploding. So you're going to see dysregulated behavior that's just kind of off balance, that you're like, are they losing their mind? What the heck is going on?
Mm-hmm.
That is all pretty typical.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, tantrums are actually very common and very developmentally appropriate and expected. However, when it becomes abnormal and a concern is when the tantrums are occurring all the time, quote unquote, all the time, when it's like all day long, or they're lasting more than 10 minutes, and you feel like your child becomes more and more off balance when they're having a tantrum, to the point where it's becoming a meltdown. Because a tantrum is more like, I wanted the red cup and you gave me the blue cup, so I'm gonna have a tantrum until you give me what I want.
Yes.
The meltdown is like a panic attack, where their system is so off that they're trying to bring it back in balance. So they'll start to scream and yell and throw and kick, because their system, whether it's their temperature, their emotions, whatever, is off balance. And so I think when you're seeing all these significant behaviors, or you as a parent feel like you're losing it, like you're afraid that you might hurt your kid, or that you're yelling at them all the time, or you're just so done with parenting, I think before you get to that point, it's really important when a parent coach can be very helpful, because they can help you put things in perspective, normalize some of those things, and then give you some very practical strategies to intervene early before it becomes a big disaster.
Yeah. You use the word dysregulation.
Yes.
Talk a lot about that. A lot of your reels on your social media talk about regulation, dysregulation. As a former educator working with challenging students, and sometimes challenging teachers that didn't understand that your inability to calm yourself down as an adult is making this situation worse.
Absolutely.
So how important is it for parents to understand the need for a regulated parent to approach a dysregulated child, and how that could really dissolve a lot of what's going on inside of them?
Yeah, I think it's really important for parents to remember that a dysregulated parent is not going to regulate a dysregulated child. So how I usually kind of compare it to is, say it's hot outside, it's 90 degrees outside, and you have on a bunch of clothes and a jacket and a hoodie, and you go running.
Mm-hmm.
What your body's going to start doing is sweat. And it's doing that because it's attempting to cool you off so you don't pass out and have a heat stroke. That's dysregulated body, is when you're overheating. The sweat helps you to regulate so that you can cool off, right? If we're coming in all hot and dysregulated with a hot and dysregulated kid, you can see that's not going to turn out too well.
No, not
you're
at all.
gonna egg each other on, and it's gonna explode into this nuclear situation, and you're gonna destroy the relationship in the process. And so I think parents keep thinking, oh, well, if I just yell at my kid or punish them or do these drastic things, then it'll stop the behavior. Well, yeah, it might stop the behavior. The problem, though, is that over time, they will become more and more dysregulated, and you are modeling dysregulation at the same time. So it's pretty hypocritical.
Yeah.
Because you're telling them to calm themselves down, but then you're having your own adult temper tantrum.
Because adults, we do have temper tantrums.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
We do.
It's not just kids.
No. Road rage is a temper tantrum.
It just looks
yelling at the ticket agent at the airport is a temper tantrum, right? And screaming at someone out your window is a temper tantrum. Like, we have them.
Yes.
And so, I mean, we all will get dysregulated. Like, there's no shame in that. But it's about understanding that, realizing that, and making sure that we're modeling the right thing for our kid. Otherwise, how are they supposed to learn that?
So moving from from toddler, let's talk about the middle school age, because a lot of parents struggle with not being the voice of their kids' decision making, because at that age, typically their peers drive a lot of the things that they want to do. And that shift sometimes can be hard for parents, but that again is developmentally appropriate.
Absolutely. So at the teenage years, middle school years, what's happening is very similar to what happens during toddler years. So there's significant and rapid brain growth going on. So all these neurons are making new connections because, again, everything's new. Hormones, all these different things are happening. There's a significant growth in weight and height. So there's lots of changes going on. And also, so they're teenagers and toddlers. I always compare them to one another. They're very similar in that autonomy and independence and control, because now they're at the age where they have more independence. They don't have to be around their parents as much. They're around their friends more. They start to be exposed to new things and have now new opinions about things that maybe are different from the values that they were raised with. And all of that is hard for parents to see. And so again, it's about, rather than snuffing it out, is understanding and being curious about their different insight or intentions behind their behaviors. And so I think for parents, it's about understanding that this need for independence and to have their own voice is so important at this age. So if you become like a helicoptery parent, where you're kind of just hovering or plowing the way or always sneaking and invading their privacy, what you're going to do is help them to dive deeper underground and be more sneaky, because they have a need to have independence. Now, it doesn't mean it's completely hands off. It just means it's important to be engaged with them, to be curious, to talk with them about what they're struggling with, who their friends are, how they feel about school, their future, their family, their body, their self-image. All of these things are really important to explore. So I think the big switch that's the hardest for parents at this stage is that during the junior high stage, the peers start to be more important than family. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest grieving point for parents, because their kid used to see them as like the best thing ever. And now they're like, oh, you're so cringy. And so that's hard. Right. So I think that's the biggest thing that I see at that age.
Tell me what you think about this parenting hack that I heard. So if you really want to know what is going on with your kids in middle school and even high school, you can volunteer to be the person that drives all the kids around, because when they're sitting in the back seat, they forget that the parent is driving, and you get to hear all of the stuff, who likes who, what's going on, and also having your house be the house that kids want to go to, because then you get a chance to see who your kids are hanging out with. Instead of them going to someone else's house, you get to really look like the cool parent, but really you're just doing intel. You're just taking intel. You're just seeing, okay, who my kids are hanging around. Then you can start asking questions. So what do you have in common with such and such? I've never seen, y'all have any classes together? So then it's more inquiry versus judgment, and you get to see who they're hanging out with.
Absolutely. Yeah, you be the mom driving people around. You are the hang up spot and the sleepover spot.
Yeah.
You know, and I think another big one too, to add on to that, is knowing, associating, and even being friends with your kids' friends' parents. Mm-hmm. Because that's a huge protective factor actually during the teenage years. Yeah. Because the kids that are hanging out with your kids, they come from families that have certain values or certain ways of interacting or speaking or things that they believe and watch. And if you are aware of that, then you can be able to know, like, what are they being exposed to? What are the other parents' concerns about their teenagers? And it's a really good kind of bird's eye view into what's happening as well too.
Is there anything different in the middle school years that you see in the high school years that parents have challenges with, that we didn't hit on with toddler and middle school?
I think it's just more of the same of middle school, but just more independence.
Yeah.
Because now they're driving, or they're riding with other people who have their driver's license. They're doing more things and spending more time away from home. So there's much less oversight. And that's why having a positive relationship with your kid from a very early age,
yes,
so that they know when they screw up that you are not going to lose it.
Yeah.
That's going to be such an important foundation, so that when they're finally 16, 17, 18, and they're at a party and they're stuck because everybody's drunk and they don't know how to get home, they know they can call you rather than be unsafe.
Yeah.
Because they know you're not going to freak out and, just ground them till eternity. And I think that foundation from early on is so important. so that they feel like you're coming from a place of understanding. And I think sometimes I tell parents this about like unconditional love and acceptance. And they're like, well, that's showing our kid that we accept and approve what they've done. I'm like, no, it's not. It's showing them that you love them regardless, that there is nothing that I can do that's so big that you will fall out of love with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I'm unconditionally loved and accepted does not mean I accept every behavior choice you make.
Right.
It just means that I will have your back. And I tell my kids that all the time, that if there's something at school that happens with a teacher or a peer or whatever, you can always tell us and we'll have your back. But we expect that you're going to be honest and forthcoming about it, because we can't come in there guns blazing and then you've been lied about something.
Yeah.
You know, so we're going to have your back, and they need to know that they can be honest and talk about these things. But that foundation has to be set early on.
Dr. Lockhart, that is so important, because I feel that once kids get into the end part of middle school into high school, if that parent-child relationship is fractured and they're not a safe place to go and share, hey, I'm having challenges with my friend, or I like this guy, who else do they have to talk to that can give them sound advice besides a peer that's their age? You don't want your kid getting wisdom from a kid that's their age, that doesn't have any years of experience. And so parents, if you're listening, it's really good to try to nurture those relationships and not be so judgmental and critical of their decisions. Just listen, be a safe place, because
Absolutely.
they need to know that they can go to you with a lot of the stuff that's going on. I used to talk to kids in my office, and I was like, man, if I was a parent, I would want to know my kid is going through this. It breaks my heart that there is a lack of trust there, which is why you are so needed.
Yeah.
You are so needed. So when someone goes to your website and they are interested in parent coaching, they're going to complete the parent quiz. It's going to ask some questions: your name, email, age of child, biggest parent challenge. They're going to submit that. What's next after that?
So then it comes into our practice inbox, and our practice assistant will contact them by email, phone, text, however they prefer, and just get a little bit of information if we need some more clarity in terms of what exactly they're looking for. We pretty much know it once they've done the full quiz. So that way we can match them with the parent coach that would be best suited for them. So if it's something where they're local, they're in San Antonio, and they're having lots of issues with a 3-year-old who is hitting mom and they can't ever get out of the house without people just feeling like they're losing it, then maybe our Kimberly can go in for the in-home behavior consultation, and then also observe the child at the school. So again, we want to look at like who's the best person, or if they're a college age student that they're having concerns with because they have a child who is very anxious or having panic attacks, then that would be a good fit for me. So, it's just really looking at like who is the best person and getting a little bit more information, because we want to make sure that there's a good fit. But if they're looking for something that we feel like is not a good match, then that's the other thing we'll do, is help them find somebody in their area, or provide resources, because we know that by the time people reach out, should have reached out months ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if they reach out and they hit a wall, it's kind of like they're done. So we really want to be as supportive as possible for people, so that even if we're not a fit, we want to help them at least continue the process to find the best fit for them.
Absolutely. How do you determine who does virtual one-on-one and who is appropriate for group?
So we don't have, for our practice right now, we don't have any groups going on. The only thing that I have is the group membership, the online parent membership. Okay. And that is like kind of they self-select in that way. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of a monthly membership where they have access to all the courses and all the resources and monthly group parent coaching. So that is kind of like decided by themselves there. But otherwise, it's really the distinction for us is whether someone needs therapy or they need coaching.
Yes.
And that's mainly the distinction we try to help people with, because we can only see people for therapy if they live in the state of Texas because of our license requirements.
Right. So someone is listening and they know they need assistance. They know they need help. They've tried everything. How do they determine, or do you determine whether or not they are appropriate for therapy if they live in Texas, or if they should go the coaching route, because the two are really different. I hope you've enjoyed part 1 of my interview with Dr. Ann Louise Lockhart. Make sure you come back for part 2. This is Health and Wellness with Coach A.T. Moore.